Welcome to our third lab in this test drive workshop series, and in this lab we're going to focus on data loading, and we're going to do this in a couple of stages. First thing we're going to look at is how to load data from your local site or laptop or computer into Autonomous Data Warehouse Cloud. And obviously that works, but it's not the most efficient way of moving data into the Autonomous Data Warehouse Cloud. So in the second part, we're going to look at loading data from our object store. So the fastest, most efficient way is to take your staging files, your data files, move them to the Oracle Object Store, and then load from the object store directly into Autonomous Data Warehouse Cloud. As part of setting up that loading process for you using our cloud, we're going to introduce you to the object store. You're going to take some files, you're going to upload them to the object store, and then you're going to use a new package inside the Autonomous Data Warehouse Cloud called DBMS_cloud, and we're going to use that as the engine for pulling data from the object store directly into Autonomous Data Warehouse Cloud. But the first part is, what you're going to do is you're going to download a zip file, expand the zip file on your computer, your laptop, and it contains the data files that we're going to use and the data files that you're going to upload to the object store. Part of this process is you're going to create a series of tables, and there's a script in your notes. There's a little link there, you can open that up and it will give you this script, and in the script we're going to create some tables, some fact tables, sales and costs, followed by some dimension tables, times, products, channels, promotions, customers, countries, supplementary demographics. And you'll notice also with Autonomous Data Warehouse Cloud, most importantly, we can ensure that your data is not duplicated and it makes sense. So we're adding some constraints to make sure that when we have a promotion ID or we have customers, that customers in the customer table are also in the sales table, so that we can't add into the sales table customers that don't exist. So there's strong what we call referential integrity here within Autonomous Data Warehouse Cloud. So once you've downloaded that, you'll copy that script into your SQL worksheet here in SQL Developer and highlight it and then just execute it. And you can see at the bottom here the output from that script where I've run it and we've created all the various objects. Once you've done that, all those objects are created, your tables node here will then show you all of the new tables that you've just created. And if they don't, you just hit the refresh and your table node will then be expandable and you can see the fact that you've created these new objects. Okay, so step one, let's look at loading data from your local computer, desktop or laptop, and into Autonomous Data Warehouse Cloud. So let's take the channels table. If you highlight that, right mouse click, you will see import data. Click on that and it's going to be a local file. So we'll go into, this is the file, datafiles.zip, that you're going to download. When you expand it, it will create this directory called data files, and what I want for this particular exercise is that file there. And as soon as I select it, SQL Developer will parse it and show me the information about that file. That looks good. My next button is highlighted. I can select that. The table name, because we right clicked on table channels, it will show me that channels is here. I can have different insert methods, so I could create a script. If I didn't want to run this right now, I could create a script that I could schedule or run later. I'm just going to hit insert. I can set, if I'm going to test this, I may only want to import 50 rows or something, so I can set a limit on the number of rows. But this is good. I just want to get all this data in quickly for you. Here's the columns that we've got in the table. I want to import data into every single column, so that's good. And then we're just going to look at the data set and find the relevant columns and make sure that the data in that data set corresponds with the data type and the scale, precision, etc. within that data. Everything looks good, so we can hit next. SQL Developer is really helpful and it gives us a quick summary. We can see what's going to happen. So our channel ID is going to go into our channel ID column in our table, so on. This all looks good. We're ready to go. There's my file. Now at this point I could save this if I'm going to keep doing this every single time. Lots of times I can save this and I can just reload the configuration file, which is handy. At this point I'm just going to finish. So we'll hit finish and it's back, it's done straight away. So it's imported that data for me. If I now click on my, quickly refresh that to make sure I get the latest view, hit data, and voila, there's my data. So very quickly, we've taken a file from our laptop and we've moved it into Autonomous Data Warehouse. We've loaded the data in, table's there, we can start querying that straight away. Couldn't be easier. Okay, so we've got our data in, but we've loaded that as a local file. That went in really fast, but with big files, we may actually want to move those to the object store, the Oracle Object Store in the cloud, so I can load from inside the cloud directly into Autonomous Data Warehouse Cloud. So how would I do that? That's what we're going to do now. So the next part of this is to go back over to our browser. So let's go back over to here. I'm going to assume, I don't think we'll chat with our salespeople right at this precise moment. I'm going to assume that maybe you jumped straight into Workshop 3 and maybe you've come straight to this point. So let's assume that either you've arrived here or maybe you logged out your browser from the earlier labs. We're going to start from scratch. So I come in again, open my browser, cloud.oracle.com. I'm going to sign in. You'll have got your tenant name from the welcome email from when you signed up, so that's good. I'm going to click on my services and then it's my username and password. Again, you'll have got these when you signed up for your trial account, so use that information to log in. Okay, you remember when we logged in, we came in here when we did workshop 1 and we clicked create instance and we click all services and we go to Autonomous Data Warehouse Cloud. All looking good. So this takes me into my cloud infrastructure environment for Autonomous Data Warehouse Cloud. Now, you remember when I did my original work, when we were looking at this, I flipped into Frankfurt, where we have different regions that you can access. In this case, let's switch back to our US region. I'm going to do that from here. Now what I want to do is get access to our object store in the cloud. So we come over to our little hamburger menu, we click on that, and you'll see a whole series of options open up. And one of them at the bottom here, if I scroll down under storage, is object storage. So let's click that. Okay, so we're on the object storage page. First thing we have to do is create a compartment. So I need to work out, okay, where am I going to put this information? And as I said, we group this information in compartments. It's just a way of logically organizing things. So I'll stick with my main compartment, which was my Frankfurt one, where I'm currently working. And probably what you will end up doing is selecting the root bucket or the root compartment, but it doesn't matter. Okay, there are no buckets here. That's kind of what we were expecting. It's brand new. So what I'm going to do, I can either click create bucket here or up here, doesn't matter. Does the same thing. Right, here we go. Create a bucket. What should we call it? ADWC lab. Let's call it that. That's as much information as we need to create a bucket. So this is going to be my storage location. And again, as before, we saw when we created the instance, these things are hyperlinked in these tables. I can go into here and now I get access to some additional features. So I can change compartments. I can move this bucket to a different compartment. Maybe I want to move it to the root compartment, etc. I can do that through here. But right now, for this lab, most importantly, what we want to do is upload some objects. Now remember that zip file that we had? I'm going to go in here and let's just, we'll take that and let's see if I can do another one. Oh, okay, let's upload that one. Let's upload another one. Obviously, if I had a my Finder open, I could go through and pick all these up in one go. Slightly bigger object there. Okay, let's just quickly go through these. So we've got channels in, we want customers, upload. Customers is going up. Got a nice bit of feedback there. Okay, browse. We'll take products next. Upload. And I think we got one more to grab, which is this little one for another example later on. Upload the object. There we go. All our files are now safely in the cloud. How do we get access to them? You're going to create a URL, and we'll show you how to do that later, but it's going to consist of three basic pieces of information. The bucket that I'm in, the tenancy that I'm using, which is this one, and the region that I'm currently in. You'll see in the lab notes how you're going to create a compartment and construct the required URL. The next thing that we need to do is to set up what's called an authorization token. So I've got my files here, but what I now need to do is grant access to this object store. So now let's see how we do that. Right, so now let's click up here, and if we scroll around, we can go to right at the top here, identity and users. So here's my user account, and if I click on my user, I get access to more information. Most importantly, you can see down the side here, if for example I want to move data from Amazon S3, I can set up the access keys here. What I want to do is set up what's called an auth token to allow me to pull data out of my container, my bucket on our object store. So what I need to do is click on authentication token or auth token and generate a new token. So what I'm going to do is just call this ADWC lab token, hit generate, and I now need to make a copy of this. Don't lose this token, as they say. Once I've got that, that's it. That's all I need to do. Now I have my files up in my object store. I've created a token, as we see here, that's going to allow me now to be able to access those files in a secure, controlled way using tokens and be able to leverage loading from our object store in the cloud directly into Autonomous Data Warehouse Cloud. So let's see how we do that. Right, we have a token So where do we go to now? Remember, we copied that token, so we need to go back into SQL Developer and we need to create a credential that's going to allow me to access my object store. So remember, this is going to be a chunk of code that you're going to run. We'll give you this code snippet so you can just copy and paste it from the notes, but we use this new package, DBMS Cloud, and we use the create credential feature. And the credential name, you can call this whatever you like. I've just called it obstore cred. To make things simple, I give it my username, and remember that token that I created, and it gave me a password, a series of characters. So that goes there, and then I can run that block of code. Right, what does that do for me? Let's have a look at our customer table. So at the moment we can see we've got no data in here. I've got all my columns set up, but no data. So let's go to the object store and pull in the data from a file that's in our object store. So we're going to now load from the cloud into Autonomous Data Warehouse Cloud, which is in the cloud. So let's go to import data, and remember we started here a while back and we uploaded the channels data and we used a local file. This time we're going to use cloud storage, and for that I don't give it a file name, I give it a pointer. So my pointer starts off with this URL set of characters. So we HTTPS Swift object store. In this case I'm going against my US data center in Ashburn. For the Oracle Cloud V1, don't worry about that. Remember my tenant name, ADWC4PM. Remember the bucket I created, ADWC lab, and then the file that's in that lab. Now for this I need to actually allow SQL Developer here to go in and look at that file and access it. So I need to give it a credential, and that is the object that I just created with that DBMS Cloud package. Okay, so how would I know if this is going to work? Well, let's hit preview and let's see what happens. Not quite what we were expecting. So at the moment I just seem to have two columns. So I know this file doesn't have a header. Okay, so I can take that off. Now I just seem to have one file, one column, and it just seems to go on, but you can hopefully see there what I don't have is a comma as a delimiter. What I actually have is a vertical bar, and there's my data. Well, so you can see within the file loading process we can manage lots of different structures of files in terms of how you set them up. Okay, but here we just have column 1, column 2, etc. So now I can see the file, I know it's going to be processed. What I now need to do is make sure that the columns, column 1, 2, 3, map to the relevant columns actually inside my table. Now, how am I going to load this? What I'm going to do is a cloud load. So it knows it's going cloud to cloud. That's the data that I want my cloud load to use. That's my target table. Now here, it's giving me some warning information about different columns. So all we're saying is, well, actually, we think this is a number or text, and it's actually coming in as a number. And we know that the process will handle that. The one that's a little more tricky is this one. So we can see that it's got a default formatting of 2 characters for the year, text for the month, and DD for the day. And we can see here, because we've got a snippet of our data set, that's not going to work. What we actually want is 4 characters. It's going to be the month number. Then what we now need to do is give it information about the date, and in this case we're using time is coming in with that information as well. So I need to tell it the format of the date. Okay, so that looks okay. And I have another date column, so I'm just going to push that into there. Then let me have a look at this. I'll say, okay, test this on, let's say, 100 rows. And I can now test it. So before I actually run this, I can run a test. Testing. So it's going to, and success. Okay, so the mappings that we've got for customer ID, customer name, all my columns in my data, in my table, are now matched correctly to the columns in the data file that is currently sitting in my cloud. So I can know that should work correctly. And again, in the summary table, we'll see all of those different mappings. So let's just hit finish. And there we go. That's now off running that load for me. And if I want to, and if it's a really big load, I can run that in the background. And then at the end, it says task is successful, import completed, and we get all the information here about the process that went on. So execution successful. So what I should be able to do now is go back into my customer table, click refresh, and there.